Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in on episode 4 of SEO Fight Club. We have an awesome topic today. It's one where none of us feel particularly comfortable, and we're going to debate it and talk about it anyway. I'd like to start with some boilerplate. So let me see if I can pin Kyle's screen. Present to everyone. There we go. We're SEO Fight Club. If you want to learn about us, just visit our website. We have some brief bios at the domain name listed there. And also, SEO This Week was pretty cool. I listened to it last night. It was pretty amazing. Clint, what can people expect to hear about in your latest episode?
Thanks for giving us a shout out. A couple things. First is the Google Webmaster Hangouts. 2 more roll-ups are there. The lady who's doing those is putting a lot of effort into them. I'm sure we all have watched his his Hangouts, and they can be a little tiring. But she's changed the format a little bit. You got to actually click through on the videos using timestamps versus her actually putting the videos and timestamping them there right underneath the thing. Not a big deal, but some good information there. There's a roll up for Gary Isles and his AMA he did on Reddit. That's actually really good. There's some good information there. A bunch of testing opportunities, I think, for everybody. And then the main crest of the rest of it is getting traffic through SEO for affiliate and pretty much any other type of website. And finally, there's a cool tool in there by Serplu, how to search in local results. I know that's a pain in the butt for everybody, so they made a tool to kind of make that easier that you might want to check out.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. I guess we'll hand it over to Kyle. Kyle is going to lead today's discussion.
This week's topic bomb, latent semantic indexing. One thing I'd like to point out is that this isn't SEO slow pitch softball league. If you watch the episodes, we've talked about keyword density, which causes all kinds of heartburn in the community. We've talked about testing methods that we've done and how you can test them, why you can test them if that's possible. What was our other topic?
Meta descriptions.
That's right, meta descriptions. Something that's completely settled in the industry, correct? Again, sticking with the theme of not backing down on anything big, we're going to talk about latent semantic indexing, which if you've been in SEO for 2 to 3 minutes, you know that this is a topic that causes a lot of stress in the community. I think the first thing is to define what is LSI. LSI are the latent part. So LSI is latent indexing. LSI are the other latent words in a conversation that give context, they give it context and meaning. That's semantics. Meaning is semantics. The indexing part of latent semantic indexing is from an early method of document retrieval. One of the early ways for systems to pull back if you're getting a relevant document were to use LSI. They're looking for the other terms that are common when you're talking about a particular topic. So if you're talking about bicycles, it'd be what are you talking about? Are you talking about mountain bicycles? Are you talking about road bicycles? Are you talking about constructing a bicycle, buying a bicycle, bicycle tires, etc.? And sorry about that. And those are the other things that give meaning to it. And so it's a form of retrieval. I think that's one of the first places that gives people a lot of heartburn is that we're not doing any indexing as SEOs. We're doing what is probably more properly labeled as latent semantic analysis, LSA. It's a less clunky term. None of us are actually doing any indexing. If Google's using it, they are using it as part of their indexing process, but it's not what we are doing. So I think that's where problems start from the beginning.
Yeah. Our industry co-opted that acronym.
Yeah, it is a clunky acronym, and it's not really correct. LSA is probably a better way to look at it. That we're doing a latent semantic analysis on documents, for what that's worth. I think it's also important to find what LSI is not. Latent semantic indexing is not keywords. We're not talking about a keyword, and LSI keywords I think is an even more clunky term, because we're not talking about words that you're trying to rank for. We're talking about those other words that give context and meaning in a conversation or in a document. It's also important to understand that means these aren't synonyms. If you're giving context and meaning, you're not saying the same word a different way. You're not using a synonym of a word. You're using LSI or LSA or those other terms that come up in the conversation, not the term itself said a different way. In Cora and POP, we talk about matches and variations. Matches and variations are often close synonyms. Would you say that's a fair to say?
Well, I think
relevant terms.
I think synonyms are part of it. I think what Google's presenting is those bold terms includes synonyms. It includes word stemming, and it includes some entities, related entities.
Right. So while there is some possible overlap when you talk about what might be those entities, again, matches and variations are often close synonyms or critically relevant terms to your target keyword, and not necessarily LSI, which also gets into then related searches. If you do a particular search for something and scroll to the bottom of the page, you can see related searches that are related to your term. There is some possible overlap, but those are not necessarily LSI. The bicycles, if you were to search mountain bicycles, the related searches might be best mountain bicycles or where to buy or those types of terms. That might be what you're talking about, but you're probably not talking about all of them as they go off into different tangents as to what you're actually talking about. They actually help you clarify perhaps what you're actually searching for. And then the idea is that, remember, latent semantics look to provide meaning. We're not restating something. We're not phrasing it differently. That's covered in matches, variations, and perhaps synonyms.
So can you give us a few examples?
Sure. So the example that I always give is if I'm talking about a kitchen. If I'm talking about a kitchen, LSI is not a different way to say the word kitchen or to a synonym for the word kitchen. LSI would be stove, refrigerator, sink, pantry, but it could be backsplash, tile, granite. It could be love, family, home. Those terms aren't different ways to say kitchen. They describe the context and the meaning of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a kitchen. Am I talking about the utility value of a kitchen, that it's a place to cook? Am I talking about that it's love and where families gather in the center of the home? Am I talking about remodeling a kitchen? Am I talking about what goes into a kitchen? Am I talking about the functions that happen in and around? So all those other terms are not saying kitchen a different way. They are describing my conversation. They help providing context and meaning, and that's what latent semantics are. What do you guys think about this, what is and is not?
Yeah, I agree with it. And it's sometimes hard to separate the what it's not from the various lists and tool outputs that you get. Like I know in the match words, you sometimes, get things that might be LSI occasionally. I don't see it all that often. I see it a lot more in the related searches.
Yeah.
And, definitely the reverse is true. When I use code to try to detect LSI, I pick up a lot of synonyms and exact match and partial match variations that might not be considered LSI, but they work themselves into those LSI lists.
Clint, I know that you do a lot with a lot of different tools. How do you, and I know you have your own on how you put things into your processes, into your on page. Does this jive with kind of what you like to do, or is this kind of, what do you think about these definitions?
I like the definitions. I think maybe later down in the conversation is because, I've followed you and you're using, what was it, Ntopic. We've used text tools, and I use Cora. And I got to tell you that applying any of those tools has never been a big winner for me in saying that it's a ranking factor. So I'm kind of staying silent until you get further on into your slide.
I think that's a perfect segue into we're going into. A lot of experts agree that LSI is not a ranking factor. And you might think that I cherry picked these from years and years ago, but these are all actually within the last couple of months. Clark Boyd, who I don't know, but just wrote an article in Search Engine Journal that from January that LSI is not a ranking factor. Roger Monti, my good friend, who I love dearly, also doesn't believe it. Bill Slosky doesn't. I love the Irish Wonder comment. SEO Theory, hey, that's SEOtheory.com. It's got to be there's no way to leverage any of this. Rand doesn't believe it. A lot of people, and this kind of gets into what you see online. You see a lot of argument and debate, and a lot of it is it's still raging ongoing. I think part of the problem is defining what it is. I think maybe a lot of the issue is defining when you go back through what it's not and what you're left with. It's a different concept. So these arguments, I think, get off track.
Yeah, the one argument I'd like to jab at a little bit is the one about it being 30 years old.
Yeah, that's
if we excluded all math that was older than 30 years, like there wouldn't be a Google, there wouldn't be computers, there wouldn't be medicine.
Yeah, it's also one thing to say that it could be maybe not in its infancy form, but it's been expounded upon or grown. It's grown. Bill Slosky, speaking of that argument, he has definitely taken the mantle of that it's not a thing. And Ted, I think this speaks to you and I directly. People use terms such as LSI and keyword density to sell their tools, like Cora and Pop. They might as well be offering snake oil.
Well, here's the thing. You know, a lot of the features in Cora, I personally don't agree with. Like, I don't think we should be banning domains from the analysis. And you know, like Clint, I'm not a big advocate for LSI. And for years, anybody who's seen me speak at trade shows, I've largely spoken against keyword density. But the reason these are in my tools isn't because they help me sell them better. It's because people said, Ted, I don't agree with you, and I think you're in a position to help me prove my case if I just had the tool to do it. And so I put those features in the software so people could prove me wrong. And I think people like that about my software is I don't come in with my own beliefs. And if you have a good argument, I'll put it in and let you make your case.
And from a black hat perspective, Bill Sklosky is the kind of guy that tells people to rank their GMBs by going in and reporting other people's GMBs so that yours gets bumped up. So take his you know, I'm careful trusting his advice and his statements too. So
he's very, very outspoken on LSI. And one I really liked was where those failed, the LSI tools or LSI concepts, is that the LSI process requires access to the database of documents in question to calculate which words are synonyms. So again, getting off track, I think immediately calling them synonyms, which that isn't what latent semantics are. But moving on in the argument, the only people with access to Google's database to do that kind of analysis, which is impossible anyway, since Google's index is much too big and changes much too frequently is Google. And this gets into a couple different arguments that we've had before, or discussions we had before about a perfect solution. You know, just because you don't have access to all of the database doesn't mean you can extrapolate meaning from the portion that we do have access to. When it comes to specific keywords, you know, or specific topics that would have latent semantics in them, we have access to 100 pages worth or more.
Yeah, we have access to the pages that are ranking, and you know that may not be perfect or real time. You know, with what Google has in their database, or not real time, because Google may not be updating real time. But you know, we should be able to pick out clues.
Yeah, this kind of gets into then the flame wars of SEO. I don't know if you guys are aware, but back in the day, philosophers and theologians would have complete flame wars over how many angels could sit on the pinhead of a needle. Real wars about this. You know, you're an absolute idiot. It's 1,000. It's 1,000,000. It's whatever it might be. And I see in LSI that sort of mindset of, you know, so there's some weird arguments that I don't think particularly hold weight. And then There's the argument that never comes up. But so the one, Ted, from earlier, LSI is old technology. It's from the 80s or from the 90s. So clearly it can't be used.
Well, honestly, that's just stupid. A kindergartner can counter that argument. So, multiplication is old. So that means I don't use multiplication?
Exactly. Clint, you do a lot with the with SEO this week, so you see a lot of this stuff, and I know that a lot of that gets into patent work. Google never said they use it, so Google's never made a statement about it, and there are no patents on LSI. Google patents.
Well, they've never said a lot of things. There's 200 supposed factors, and there isn't a patent for each one of those factors. And Gary Isles, he made up a new one. What was it? Porny words, porniness.
Yeah, porniness is a fact.
There's no patent on porniness, but obviously Google's using it for something.
Sure, Google uses semantics, but it uses other semantics. It uses schema. It uses Hummingbird. It uses RankBrain. A lot of the people that don't like LSI will then talk about semantics in other ways, which I found very, very interesting. I think Slosky has multiple webinars he's done about Google using semantics.
Well, my big complaint when people invoke AI and invoke the algorithm names is they never provide examples. They never demonstrate these trends they're seeing. They always just say, Google has AI, therefore these things are magically solved, and show me some proof of that. Otherwise, you're just bestowing magical superpowers onto Google.
And plus, wouldn't you teach AI LSI, the LSI technology? Wouldn't that be part of the learning process for that AI? Words and related words and semantics. So schema, Hummingbird, RankBrain are all driven by older technologies. When it's, in my opinion, LSI would be one of those, and it would kind of have to be if you wanted to teach it to learn the best result for a specific thing.
The thing that I would also like to see is the divestment of an LSI concept and Hummingbird or RankBrain or AI. Like, okay, if that's not part of it, show me how it's divested.
Yeah, and I would love to have a RankBrain episode because people invoke RankBrain for like 80 different things every day.
Yeah. If you don't understand why it's ranking, it's got to be RankBrain.
It's the god of the mysteries of the world. That's God, and then as they shrink, God also shrinks.
Yeah.
There's the idea that there's no proof. Everyone who writes on this says there's no proof of LSI, or the alternative makes the statement it's too hard to test to disprove. I could take the time to disprove it, but it's too hard. And this to me is the laziest of all the arguments against. I always love when somebody tells me I searched and I couldn't find it. I'm like, well, where'd you search? Your garage? It's called Google. There are ways to look for answers instead of just saying that you don't think they exist. And then the alternative that it's too hard to test, I find to be remarkably lazy. You can't tell me that all those people, all those experts that are anti this concept can't think of a way to test it.
Yeah, it's the classic trick of let me make some bold claims and please prove me wrong, because I'm not going to provide any data or make any effort to prove my claims.
Right. I'm just going to say that it's not, and I'm going to say that there's an alternative and not provide any data for that as well. Or then again, kind of get into the idea that, well, it's Hummingbird or RankBrain. So, and that's like a be all to end all kind of an answer. The thing you don't hear is the last line. I did a study. I did a large correlational study. I did a large case study. I did a single variable test, as much as you can do with that in this environment. And I found that they are not a ranking factor. You never hear that. And so single variable tests are difficult in this thing, and we'll discuss that. But really, though, you could do a large scale study. These guys do large scale studies all the time, and they have access to correlational tools. None of that ever happens.
Yeah, and why is LSI in Cora? It's so that people can analyze the data.
Right.
I hope every day that people do studies, and I put the capability in there so that people can.
And to that point, there, in this thing, I personally like LSI, but I am happy to be wrong about it. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand about this show, or Ted and I, when you and I go back and forth on something, there is no hubris in this. There's nothing involved that would hurt my feelings if it turns out that LSI isn't a ranking factor or is a ranking factor. It's a matter of following it down, following the data, following the tests that we can do, and then seeing if it actually applies into the real world. That's the whole point of this whole thing. Not who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I'm happy to be wrong. Like, if somebody can come out with a study and prove me wrong, that puts the biggest grin on my face, because it's free, painless learning about how our world works.
Exactly.
And 99% of the time, I have to go through the pain to learn something new. So if somebody wants to prove me wrong, you're my new best friend.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of studies, tests, data, Ted, we've got this out of Cora. Can you walk us through this?
Yeah. This isn't a report from Cora, but this is data that comes from Cora's ability to pick out match words from Google search results. And Google very kindly makes those variations bold. And last year, Google took those away from mobile, which caused a big panic in our world, because we all know how important those variations are. And so we started saying, well, what else could we do if Google, eventually takes them away from desktop too? And it's unlikely that Google will, because it's really the feature of Google search that says, look how quality our search results are. Look how relevant our search results are for the thing you entered into search. So if they want to take that away from the population in general, it's going to hurt Google probably more than it'll hurt us. But one of the things we came up with was that we could use LSI analysis on the search results themselves to get at some of these variations that Google is using. And so what I did was I did LSI analysis on the link text and the summaries and the results, and I get these words. And when you see this 13 up here, that's a threshold. That means that to make the list, the phrase needed to appear in at least 13 of the top 100 results. And so we get the threshold counts in parentheses on the side. And the green ones, they pass all the way through. And the yellow ones, they appear on at least a couple of the lists. And so we can get most of the list by changing the threshold that we work with, but we get a lot of other things too. Like, our keyword in this case was DUI lawyer Los Angeles. And over here we see arrested,
Right.
California. And so these weren't our terms. California might be a synonym for Los Angeles, but call or case, charge, these would be the LSIs popping up in our solution to get at these variant match words.
I love that. I love the consultation one right under that, because what's the context of this? Are we talking about DUI death stats? We're talking about, getting a lawyer, and getting a lawyer, you're going to have a consultation.
Yeah, and before people start panicking about, SEO Armageddon and Google taking away the match words, we've been working on this problem for over a year. And while I can get up to 54% of them with just LSI alone, when we add just doing the Cartesian product of the partial match words of the search terms, and we add in word stemming for different conjugations and forms of the words, we can get to 80% or higher of the original Google matchword list. So we're not too worried about an SEO Armageddon, but LSI is, a real part of the solution to that problem. What if Google takes the variations away? Well, we can actually detect them.
Exactly. There's one more slide here, Ted. Top words versus LSI words. Can you walk us through this one?
Yeah, so this one I need to disclaimer quite heavily. This is a field observation. This isn't a proven thing. I see this a lot, and I tend to see this pattern when there are relatively few variant matchwords. When there's a lot of variant matchwords, I think the same forces apply, but it's very hard to see the pattern because there's a forest in the way. And what I tend to see is this triangle shape here, where it funnels in as you go to page 1, where you have your targeted terms at the top. And again, these lists are the top 30 keywords on each of the top 100 websites. So these are the top words being used on each page, and I go all the way out to 4-word phrases if they can score high enough to be at the top. And so we see the variant matchwords in yellow, but we see the LSI terms all over these lists. So again, we see it, but this pattern, this funneling into page 1, appears to imply that the ratio of your targeted keywords to the usage of LSI terms is important. And another thing I've noticed but not proven is that when you have trouble trying to break into the top 100 results with a new page, for example, oftentimes I find just getting your matchwords, your variations, your target keywords into the top of this list helps you break into that top 100 so you can actually start doing the iterative cycles of SEO.
Makes sense.
But again, this isn't proven. This is just something I observe, fairly commonly. Any thoughts on that?
It makes perfect sense. I mean, you're seeing a trend. The idea is that using more of the LSI terms, if you will, moves more towards the top. The more you got, the better you're doing. And as a very general rule, the more you got on something, the better you're doing in SEO.
So yeah, I'm not sure what to make of it. It's just an observation from the field.
So I've got some single-ish variable tests. In order to get LSI, in order to generate terms, you have to get out of the lorem ipsum realm, because lorem ipsum isn't going to generate any latent semantics. It's not going to generate any other terms that we can use. So tests that I've run in the past are like this one. So wonky ficus stand. Nobody is intentionally optimizing for that 3-word phrase, but you can see it produces 11,600 results. Because it produces those results, then we do have an index that we can play with, and we can start to run LSI analysis on those terms and actually pull out what are LSI terms. And so to run this test, I've got my lorem ipsum on the left. You can see that example. And then the LSI goes into those spots. So the terms that are pulled out in the LSI analysis as LSI go into those particular spots. On the control pages, we put in words exactly in those same places, but they aren't what are LSI terms. They're just random English. At that point, each time I run this type of test, the page that receives the LSI will jump to the top. There were 4 other controls in this test, and you can actually see at the bottom of the screenshot, there's one right there. And then, of course, all the other sites that exist in the index, but the one that receives the LSI always moves to the top.
So what tool did you use to determine the LSI?
For this particular one, I've done it 2 different ways with 2 different tools that I particularly like. One is the end topic, and I've also used Cora's LSI.
How, what would be the best way to duplicate your test? Would it, Another thing is, could we try that test using Ted's English ITSM creator?
I think for sure, as long as we filtered out the terms that would ping as LSI, as long as those are removed from the English IPSM, the random English words, and then to make sure that we don't muddy the waters, but I think it would work just as well.
Yeah, and this kind of test, I think, is totally valid. I agree with you. It's not a single variable test. So if that heading was confusing to you, the S-ish VT test, I'd probably call this a field test, because you're going up against actual sites with a term, that those other sites that aren't your own is ranking for. Now it's relatively low competition, and I know a lot of people will nitpick it, but what we're talking about here is a step up from single variable to a low competition field test.
Exactly.
It's actually a steeper test in some regards.
On the other hand, you can say that it's also more open to error, because now we're introducing a lot more factors than our just little controlled environment.
Yeah, but it's the type of thing that when combined with the single variable test would probably lend a lot of confidence, especially, if you get result A and then you confirm result A in the field.
Yeah.
He
also suggested removing sentiment words, just as an add-on to that.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if wonky is a sentiment word. That'd be interesting. The thing that I found is if you decide to do these tests on your own, absolutely should. When you want to get a 3-word result phrase or a 3-word result and get this kind of thing, adding an adjective at the front, it's unexpected, often will produce a good, around say 10 to 20,000 type of cert. But I wonder if we're kind of getting ourselves into sentiment words by doing that.
Yeah, and I would wonder about common adjectives like blue or red, if they might have unwanted effects as well. I just don't know. I haven't tested.
I think I mentioned last week one of those terms I used was like beer comb cheese or something like that, and I used microphone mouse cup. That just came from looking at stuff on my desk. So you can do it without adjectives.
Yeah, and I know that Josh had a test case a couple weeks ago where their random text generation put the word sex in the test, and it looked like it may have impacted their results.
Porniness.
Porniness is shout out to Kyle's test that gets an honorable mention there. It may have triggered porniness.
So I wanted to bring up and just blaze through this real quick. Some people don't like LSI, but they do like NLP, natural language processing, or like TF-IDF, which is term frequency divided by inverse document frequency, or they like vectors. Vectors are plotting out words that are close to each other in a sentence. The banana is yellow. The idea is that banana is usually so many words away from yellow. Entities are topics. An entity is literally a person, place, or thing that you can identify. And a lot of these things that look at the topics involved, or that can be easily identified. And you can say that this is a thing, and helping search engine understand what those things are.
My understanding is that TF-IDF came out of math that was largely performed in the 60s and 70s. So it's and IDF, we can't have Google's database, so we can't really calculate an IDF unless we are Google.
That's exactly correct. I've always wondered about the people that don't like one thing but love TF-IDF. And the IDF that they would have to be using would be the available documents. Like say the top 100, they're going to call that their IDF. But if they make any kind of argument that they don't have, that the reason that something like LSI is incorrect is because you don't have access to the entire database, then they're instantly invalidated. So I've been playing with these things a lot, and kind of the interesting thing that I found on all of them is they almost all get to the same result. None of these things are necessarily SEO things, really. Natural language processing is a way to to understand how language works, and especially how people respond to language. Term frequency, inverse document frequency is another indexing technique. Word2Vec is also trying to understand how language works. Entities are topics, but again, those actually, that a lot of that comes back from NLP concepts. But what I found is that when you run tools that use these types of analysis to then generate a list of words of what a document or a corpus of documents is about, they all pretty much end up at the same spot. And so let's pretend that Google uses one of these and not the others. If you kind of end up at the same spot anyway, then it's really kind of, I think, picking the one that works best for your process. I kind of put a little visual together in case people were missing this. If all of these are the other terms that Google might be using, or terms that Google is using, and we can kind of narrow in on using any of those and kind of get to this general spot, it seems like a good thing to do. And we don't need to fall victim to like the perfect solution that we're not going to get all of the terms.
Well, and we see them in different places. Like when Google did the press release about RankBrain coming out, they gave a very specific example of see it in action. And that example was the query, I believe it was, what are the animals that exist at the top of the food chain? Or what are the animals called at the top of the food chain? And the natural language processing, I think they were trying to demonstrate with that is it didn't show a bunch of pages that asked the question because Google, you know, everybody's press was Google asked this question about RankBrain. It's that the Google knew not to rank pages with the question, but to rank pages with the answer. And so they showed pages that had apex predator. And so while it's not a ranking factor per se on something, it definitely boosted pages about apex predator because it knew that that was the answer to the question being asked. Yeah. And so when you see like TF-IDF, you know, that's a relevancy based on match counts. And I think Google uses that. And I think Google uses the natural language processing you know, and figuring out what you're asking for. But those are different parts of search. You know, you could almost say that RankBrain example is more about taking a very long tail search string that Google may not have ever seen before and turning it into an equivalent short tail search for apex predators.
Exactly.
And that's cache utilization, you know, and so I think you got to figure out how these technologies fit into Google's processes, and they might not all fit in the ranking algorithm itself.
I might almost argue that in the end, it doesn't really matter, because I think they all end up with the same relative amount of concepts, topics, terms, and so like the people that might go that Google isn't using LSI, but it's using NLP, it's using natural language processing. If you do NLP analysis, you pretty much end up at the same place that you are. With
your LSI on the question will probably get the answer.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. That they all end up. Clint, I'm sorry that I think we've been cutting you off a bit.
Nope, you guys are nerding out, so I'm just sitting back here trying to.
Just want to blaze through this because we do, as you mentioned, LSI concepts are in both Cora and Pop. Ted, this is what it looks like in Cora.
Yeah.
You actually have customization that I don't think anybody else does.
Well, I just wanted to briefly tell people how it works in Cora, because you have to scan for these LSI words. And so there are three components in how Cora does its scanning. And I consider Cora's scanning, you know, very basic. It can get very complicated, and there are some amazing solutions out there that do get very complicated. And so the three components are documents that you scan through, the threshold, so how many of those documents need to have a word in order for that word or phrase to make the list, and then filters, you know, how can we filter out the garbage that we really don't care about. And so in Cora, we have the number of top 100 results to use. That's our number of documents. And then on how many of those top 100 results does a phrase need to appear. That's the threshold. So it needs to be on at least 5 of them. And then our filters are the stop words. So if it exactly matches a stop word, we kill it. If it starts with the stop word, we kill it. And if it ends with the stop word, we kill it. And that way, if you're searching for boats, boats for isn't an LSI phrase. We kill it because for is on our stop word list. Or for boats isn't an LSI phrase. We kill it. But speed boats, it's an LSI phrase because speed is not a stop word, so it passes as long as it meets the threshold. And so that's how LSI and Cora works.
And then you actually, what's not shown here, though, is you have one other thing where you do run it through correlational analysis with Pearson's and Spearman's, right?
Yeah. So there's a slide that didn't make the cut because we're trying to keep it short, but you can sort those results by correlation with ranking, which is one way to use the LSI data, which of these words appear to influence rankings. And then you can also sort by your deficit descending, which terms am I simply being beaten by the competition the most with? And by sorting the LSI those 2 different ways, you get 2 sets of LSI recommendations. And I recommend if you're making content and you're wondering what those terms are, do it both ways. Sort by correlation descending, sort by your deficit descending.
Makes sense. This is LSI and POP. What we do here, we don't give the same type of allowance that TED does, which is really fantastic, where you can choose the documents and choose the number of matches that you want. That's all built in to the tool. What we do is we start off with basically one large set of words, and then we run through different filtering processes to get down to basically words that all of them agree, the LSI, the NLP, and the TF-IDF, basically kind of where they have agreement with some parameters here and there, and then some filtering out as well. And then what we give, we cycle back through and do a weighting importance. So it's not as nearly as cool as Cora doing the correlational analysis to what might be moving rank, but what appears, it's a measurement of how important a word appears to the document or the set of documents. And so that's like what you see on this like 0.17 is how important that word might be. And then we show how many times you are in the target document, the target URL, and how many times the competitor averages. And you can kind of sort through those. The goal of what we're trying to do in this versus like Cora, which is giving you kind of all that analysis, is we're trying to pin it down into where these different places have agreement. It's kind of the main movement of what these words are designed to do, and then show what might be the most important ones and how many times you're using them and how many times you might want to use them. That's what we spit out here. But again, Ted, you and I are snake oil salesmen because these things are in our tools.
Well,
so it's a moot point.
Yeah, you've never seen an ad for Cora and Pop out there where we're saying it's the best LSI tool on the market. Like, I've never made that ad. I've never made that claim. And, I put the tool in there so that people could take me to school on this topic. And so
I think I'm ready to make that ad. I'm ready to make that ad. This is the best LSI tool. Yeah. And then that's all we got. I'm sure we went way over. Well, not too bad. I don't know if any questions popped up or.
Yeah. Let's go through a few. The first one I saw is that you guys apparently have a conference in Phoenix. What's that all about?
Oh yeah, Kyle and I are teaching. It's Terry. His last name escapes me right now. Yeah. But we're speaking at a conference in late April. I put the link in the chat if you guys want to check it out.
It's called SEO Spring Training, and I think it's SEOspringtraining.com.
Let's see. We get a question. Can hot linking images from garbage scrape sites hurt a site? Does that make sense to you guys?
I don't think that's about our topic, is it?
It's not. It's a quick question. Well, I think that if you're scraping Google images and feeding it back to Google, you're probably gonna run into some problems eventually. So I'd be careful with that. And there's plenty of free sources of images out there that you could use, syndicated content and that stuff. So maybe look at that route. If Google can't read, what's the point of LSI? Fair question. Kyle?
Oh, it goes into Google, how Google reads. So Google can't read like you read, but Google reads in how it can read. And so it still needs to understand what you're talking about. Getting back to the kitchens conversation, if it's going to rank pages about kitchens, it needs to know what it needs to rank.
So,
and that's where the LSI would come in.
Here's a follow-up question. You're pretty famous for your rhinoplasty contest entry that shot to the top of page 1 after 4-6 weeks.
That's right. Yeah.
And in that, what blew people's mind was you did it with Latin, and what pissed off Google was you did it with Latin.
Right.
And but in that, you peppered your tuning with LSI, right?
That's correct. So I ran it through to get how many times I need my exact keyword in specific signals or specific factors, and then how many times I need to get my variations of that, and then how many times I need to get my LSI into that. And then from there, having the numbers of what are needed, I crassly copied and pasted those 3 things into those different signal areas. So the signal areas are factor areas being your H tags, your paragraph, your image all, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's what I did. So I had everything was all Latin, and then I went back in and copied and pasted in those terms.
And I'd like to point out that Google flagged that with a pure spam manual action, and I couldn't disagree more. That was the most educational, insightful industry content I have ever seen for the SEO industry. There was nothing spam about that.
The other thing about it too is people talk about that how can your content rank? It's not relevant. And the argument is you're missing it completely. This is the most relevant content. This is 100% the most relevant content because it has the exact keyword, it has the match words or variations, and it has the LSI on the page the times that Google is looking to see. It's the most relevant possible content that Google could have possibly wanted to see.
So let's see here. Let me see if we can find another good question. Scanning the list. Got to get people to put some asterisks in front so that we can see them. Oh, yeah, somebody asked about rhinoplasty. Think we got that. Please explain more on sentiment words and their effects. So we probably need to have a show on sentiment at some point. But if you put in a keyword like Seattle plumber or Miami plumber, what you'll basically see is that Google tends to favor things that say best in the title. And if you put in jQuery plugins, you'll see Google favoring things that say unique and cool. And so Google also has this AI tool that quantifies sentiment of keywords and phrases, saying how favorable is it. And in the Google search results, I recently detuned a page for all of the keywords it ranks for. And the bold terms that Google makes in the search result, it latched onto the word awesome. Wasn't part of the search term, made it bold. So there's all these clues that sentiment is wired in, and I'm not exactly sure the relationship between sentiment and LSI. There might be a relation there because, you might talk about best or cool or awesome, around whatever it is the topic you're targeting. Those might naturally become LSI terms. We really haven't studied it enough. Thoughts?
Is it possible, how hard do you think it'd be to make an actual list of sentiment keywords and then put those into a tool like Pop or Cora or whatever and highlight those in a different color so you can see that a little bit better? Because I know you got one of the factors in there, Cora, already, where best is a factor.
Yeah, I have about a dozen, and then I have a catch-all sentiment words one that's looking for about 25 or 30. And we know that best is like there's something magical about it. And so where I'm at with the Cora factors is, can we find others that commonly trigger? And so best is really the strongest one of them all. But yeah, we're looking for more. So I'd say we're gathering data.
I think it'll be cool to just have that in a tool that kind of, just highlights it. Maybe not as calling it a factor, but maybe as part of the LSI tool. Like Lee said, that sometimes they show up in your LSIs. So maybe highlighting those and saying, kind of a ding, 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 just give you something else to think about.
Yeah. I know that Josh's group has asked for LSI and various zones of the pages. And it's technically possible, but I have to kind of change the order of operations within Cora, because currently we run the Cora analysis, run all the factors, and then, as a parting thought, we do an LSI analysis. We kind of need to start with the LSI analysis, and then we can say, is LSI matches and headings a factor? Is LSI matches and titles a factor? Is LSI matches and meta descriptions a factor? But we got to refactor the whole product to kind of pull that off.
Yeah.
Which, might happen.
You can test it out on Bing first. Hint, hint.
Yeah. At some point, we may have to do a contest to see how many people listening would want Cora for Bing.
For sure.
Yeah, the problem has always been not enough people would sign up for it, and it's kind of expensive to build and maintain.
Yeah.
Questions. EMQ variants and LSI and headings and heading and titles. Not sure what that question is, but do you have any comments on exact match query in relation to LSI?
Not really sure what they're asking. So I don't really want to,
Okay. Here's one for you, Kyle. I know this is a broad question, but is doing a pop report enough to outrank the big directories or sites?
If you are a big directory and you're putting them in, then sure. But I mean, in terms of their on-page, but you have to realize there's more than just on-page going on.
Yeah. Google favors those directories or sites for a reason. It's kind of counterproductive, in my opinion. And I'll argue this one it's just like, why answer a search result with a list of more search engines where you have to go search again if your purpose is to end searches? But those are all ad driven, so there's more than an on page behind it. I've done it with pop reports, but that's long tail stuff.
Yeah,
you're gonna have to have links if you want to go after the serious terms in local and beat those sites out.
Yeah, and
I'm sorry.
I was just going to quickly say, and I'm going to make a prediction here, everybody. When you go search Miami plumber and Seattle plumber and those kinds of keywords, the website you'll probably see gaming sentiment the most will be Yelp.
The only thing I was going to add to it was that when you're making your strategy for your SEO campaigns, you probably want to look at the sites that you can pick off. If you're looking at a particular phrase, look at the sites that are pages that you can create. And then those are the ones you're really trying to pick out as your competitors to go after, because then you can see how many spots you actually have available on the first page to you. You might only have 1 or 2 spots. And if you have 0 spots, then you might want to think about a different keyword.
Yeah. That's what I do for Cora and Pop is I only compare against the sites that are like, so another local business for in this example are the ones that I would really worry about. I don't stress about Yelp, Home Advisor, and all that madness because I got to beat them with links. I know it already, so that's
one of the big differences between Cora and Pop is in Pop, you pick sites that you want to be like or you think that you're like. And in Cora, you would typically ban sites that you think are outliers. So they're kind of coming from different directions. But, you know, they're both there. Like one of the things I don't like about always banning websites, always not picking the directories is I think that Clint is right. It's good for the quick wins. If you're looking to get there fast, you can find those quick wins by banning those big sites. But I think in terms of long-term strategy, eventually you want to rank where they are. So eventually you're going to need to compete with them in some way. So unless you've given up on those top 3 positions and you assume you'll never get there, you know, your long-term strategy should include them.
Yeah, that's just when you turn on the off-page factors. That's really
Kyle, for the rhinoplasty, did you put LSI in the titles and H1s or in the Latin or both?
Yeah, I sprinkled them in everywhere. Most though the H tags were related searches. So rhinoplasty plano, scroll to the bottom, see the related searches. That's where nearly all of my H tags came from.
And let's see, we'll do one last off topic. Is link in YouTube playlist description a ranking factor?
Clint, what do you think?
Well, it's not a ranking factor, but if you get enough of them, it'll certainly help you rank.
Oh, and I guess one more Pop question. Does Pop have an API?
We do not. We do not. We're kicking that around. I'm willing to be talked into it, but so far the arguments have not been persuasive.
I don't see what the use would be unless you're running a whole bunch of them and you want to automate it, in which case make an automation tool for that.
And Jordan Pierce has a question for Josh Bashinsky, but I'll let them take that offline.
That's a different show. That's a different show.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Please remember to subscribe and to ring the bell so you get notifications. And please do subscribe to SEO This Week. It is an awesome resource, especially if you don't want to spend tons of hours combing through hundreds of articles. Let Clint do that for you. So subscribe to SEO This Week and look forward to next week's topic. I don't know. Are we spoiling next week's topic, or
I think we keep it a secret. Let's keep it a secret.
No. I already did an SEO This Week. So
okay, spoil away.
If you want
to know what it is.
If you want the spoiler, you have to go to SEO This Week
there you go.
and watch the latest episode to get the topic spoiler.
So,
thank you guys, and we'll cut it here. And again, if there are questions we didn't get to, feel free to reach us on our own sites, Digital Ear for Clint, Page Optimizer Pro for Kyle, or High Voltage SEO for Kyle, and SEO Tool Lab for me. We all have contact forms. So thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone.